Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Whiskey Wednesdays. Today I'm joined by Max Feinstein, and we're really excited to chat about his new solo project that he's been working on, and a lot of things that he's been dealing with in his life, specifically as someone with hemophilia. Thanks, Max, for joining us today. I'm really excited to chat with you.
It's really my privilege, I promise.
Awesome. So I guess for people who might not know your music journey, how did you get started in music?
Well, I was a kid in a suburban area of New Jersey who asked for a guitar in the year 2000 when he was 12, so I kind of heard a lot of loud, angry music. There was an undercurrent of music in my household anyway. A lot of show tunes, a lot of like Paul Simon and Frank Sinatra. And like my sister was a little older than me, so she always had her finger more on the current pulse of certain things. But when you're 12 years old in the year 2000, the big dominant forces have been grunge already, and new metal was particularly vogue at the time. So you'd hear a lot of distorted guitars and be like, "That sounds awesome. That sounds cool. This is the thing that's cool right now." I had tried other instruments before guitar, and they all kind of sucked for me. Electric guitar specifically is like the easy avenue towards expression, I think.
Yeah.
So it took.
When did you start creating your own music and writing your own songs?
I remember strumming like super idly on like open strings and putting like a really primitive rhythm to it like 3 weeks after I got the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really take it any further than that. I still remember that thing because I'm like that guy who I keep the scrapbook of all the ideas I have and kind of backlog them if especially something I'm drawn to occurs. So that one might be idea one, and that's like the first one for like a while. The first time I really started writing songs, I'd say, was in high school.
I know you said your parents were playing like show tunes and Paul Simon and all that stuff, but what was the first direction of like musical influence that you took yourself in?
So for that, I would say one of the first songs I wrote rather than being sort of an accomplice to, or because I was in other people's bands. I was in a band with my friend Rebecca. I was like the fourth member of an all-girl power trio for a minute.
Nice.
She goes by the name Oddness now, and her stuff is fantastic. So, hey Rebecca. But so I would play her music in her band. I was drawn to strong songwriters, or people who already had something they were kind of enthusiastic about. When I started writing, just kind of went wherever. I think the first song that I felt really psyched on that I did was kind of Zeppelin-y, little Zeppelin-y. It was called Doghouse Blues, and it was my first real attempt at writing a riff that felt like the kinds of things that I would listen to on the radio or on records, where it feels kind of like a Mobius strip to me, like the idea of this perfectly seamless architecture in terms of being a song. It was the first time I think I felt like I had done something of my own accord that resembled that.
Cool. Yeah, I will say, I think I listened to some of your music now, and there are definitely in the musical elements, some bluesy aspects, some like folky aspects, but your voice is more almost like a pop punky voice, but with a little bit of a growl to it. So it's an interesting mix, I would say, but it's really cool when you hear it together.
I like what I like.
Yeah.
And I like to do the things I want to do. When left to my own devices, I'll just kind of go with whatever I'm feeling. I like a lot of things. I'm happy about the things that I just sent you. Those are good things. I look back on my solo catalog with a confused sort of emotion, because I was writing for a long time from a portfolio perspective, So I have, some attempt at what feels kind of like a fuck you song, or like a, the kind of archetype that Maroon 5's Harder to Breathe might live in. But like, I appreciate the effort. It got me where I am now. It was an integral link, and I'm proud of the work. But the kind of lyrical work I've had to do since then to be more considerate of the subject matter and feel like I'm writing authentically. But your first record, I feel like your first record is always gonna be a kitchen sink sort of record. You're gonna be trying to do everything. You're gonna be showing off everything in your tool belt, unless you're an incredibly focused, deliberate person.
I was gonna say, you're always just like growing as a musician, over time. You hear a lot of different musicians change their styles slightly or even drastically if they've been a working musician for, like, your first album was almost 10 years old now. So of course you're gonna have some new different influences and changes that happen.
It's a lot of the same things, though, I'm noticing.
Yeah.
Their takes on things like Beatles flavored things in places, perhaps a Prince flavored thing, or a Prince informed thing, which is where I feel like that growl you mentioned sort of lives. Is I feel like Prince is a pretty big influence on me. That's his symbol right there,
Nice.
above Daryl, or below Daryl. But Prince's sort of expressionism with his voice is gorgeous. And you listen to Paul McCartney and Prince, you're getting a different, with McCartney it's almost song to song. With Prince it's more seemingly album to album. But you're getting this huge spectrum of vocals.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're pulling your influences from so many different places. It's cool.
Yeah. It's the new stuff is fun. From a technician standpoint, it's better, but in the sense that it's better constructed and better executed for a number of reasons. I'm a much better musician now, but also I'm in far less pain. That first record felt like it was going to be a one-shot deal. We weren't sure if my arm was going to snap in half or what. I guess I should get into that.
Yeah. So I was talking to you before and found out that you have hemophilia. Do you want to just like give a little bit of a description of what that is and how you've been dealing with that? Yeah.
So hemophilia, it is a bleeding disorder. Our bodies are these magnificent gooey factories, essentially, where even though I'm sitting here in this chair, you're sitting in your chair or on a stool, I can't tell, but your body is still, things are moving. Blood is still circulating through you. Neurons are still firing. We are a factory in that sort of sense. And when things are banging around in your body, it may be that you bleed a little bit on a microscopic level. But we have these proteins in our body that tell us to start clotting when that happens on a microscopic level. And then we have these other proteins that tell us to cut that out. Like, hey, dude, you did enough. If you keep going, he's going to end up with a blood clot in a place a blood clot doesn't belong. That's how embolisms happen. And my situation is I'm missing a significant amount of one of those proteins of the clotting variety. So while we are bleeding and clotting on a microscopic level, sometimes those microscopic bleeds, when that sort of, if you imagine the clotting cascade is a row of dominoes in terms of the way that it is activated, if that other domino is too small to knock the next one over, then bleeding continues, clotting takes longer. It's kind of like a dial-up modem in that way. And that can mean sort of spontaneously bleeding into joints. The one example I use a lot of is, do you know the band Porcupine Tree?
No, I don't, but that name is amazing.
Right. So Porcupine Trees, he's been working under his own name, Steven Wilson, for a very long time now. He actually just put out a record that I've been meaning to listen to. But Steven Wilson, Porcupine Tree, he's also known for his work with remixing the King Crimson catalog. And so I saw them in my senior year of high school. Like I'd been writing songs. I felt like I was figuring out how to write songs. I felt like I was on the right path. I was like really feeling myself. and I go to Town Hall in New York to see Porcupine Tree on tour for a record called Dead Wing, which is a huge one for me.
Yeah.
And they play Trains, and Trains is an amazing song. I will openly weep at that song. It is that moving to me. And I clapped because, I like the song. Because that's what you do to express enthusiasm at a song that you enjoy a band performing. The physicality of clapping caused me to bleed into my elbow. Because I liked a song that a band was playing.
You were too enthusiastic about it.
It's one of those things, like, you might also bleed for like a hair of a second doing the exact same thing. It's just your body's protocol functions as it was intended. So the thing about it is I just kind of kept doing it. Like, I would bleed and it would heal, and I would medicate for it, and it would heal, and then it would happen again, and it was what is called a target joint. And over time, when you have blood in place, blood's not supposed to be, some things happen. So by the time I was 21, one of those things was basically arthritis, and that's not uncommon. You'll hear that in our community in knee replacements early in life are very much a thing. But I was told that my arm was, the term is bone on bone, which is essentially on par with what a 70-year-old experiences. It's maddening. Imagine your own body gaslighting. I'm not sure if you've had any experience with a chronic affliction yourself before I speak presumptuously.
Yeah, no, fortunately I have not. Yeah.
That is fortunate. It sucks when your vessel, like the one thing you know outside of your brain, is something that is unreliable on a sort of cellular level.
And like, you can't control it. It just does its thing.
It is, for a very long time, it was unmanaged in a sufficient way. I was still experiencing breakthrough injuries. I was still playing shows. That was sort of a decision I made. I'm like, if it's already fucked, then I'm just going to keep doing the things that mean something to me.
Yeah.
And so I found a way to keep playing the guitar. I found myself in more aggressive, creative situations. I found ways to continue to push things forward. Not always wisely, but absolutely a product of necessity.
Yeah.
At the time. But yeah, sometimes you can have all the medicine in the world, and it's an expensive disease to manage.
When did you first get diagnosed or find out that this was happening?
A year.
A year ago?
No, oh god, no.
I was like, a year ago?
No, 1 year old.
1 year old.
That would be a weird...
Okay.
I've heard stories, especially in milder cases, where that's the case. There's one of us, also the technology makes it easier to discover this stuff. The awareness is higher than it was perhaps when I was a young child, let alone when the elder statesmen of our community, which I'm surprised there are so many of, it's a lot easier to track now, and it's never been easier to manage in that way.
And, you were saying that you just pushed through for shows because you had to play. How long were you able to do that for, or until it affected you to a point that it was too much?
You make your choices. So I was on a regimen of medicating, a prophylactic regimen to prevent against more spontaneous injuries. I have played as long as I've needed to play, which has been as long as 4 or 5 hours in a day. There was one day in 2019 where I think I played 14 shows in the span of a week.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's a lot for somebody who doesn't have a disease that will mess up their joints.
I was totally MVP of that week in the music community. I'm calling it, you know. That's a proud one. There was a lot of, I'm a sideman as well, and a band member. So, you know, when I figured out that I could hang with my arm, that I could still be a guitar player and be a part of a community outside of sort of fringe situations. Because for a while I didn't really interface with the community at first. I just kind of made music in more of a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, once I figured out I could be in a community and get work that way, then I leaned into it and had a period where I was really trying to play with everyone that I knew.
Just trying to get your hands into everything.
I'm privileged to know some incredibly talented musicians and some songwriters that have been very influential on me and very motivating.
Yeah. I'm sure that, you know, has helped you keep pushing through this process.
It made me want to push through.
Yeah.
For a long time, I was still writing. I did my one record, and then I sort of started work on a second thing. I had the idea for what is called Betamax, which is the EP I put out in 2019. I had that idea in like 2013 after I put out my first record as a joke, because like my name is Max and you know Beta is second, and an old video medium that I've never even seen. So the idea had been there for a while, and then I just kind of shelved it once I started getting active on other people's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I liked backing up other people. I wasn't a great singer at the time. It was a lot of effort to do both. I was in a lot of pain, so I was like, I wanna get a bird's eye view of people I had, you know, that are awesome at this, and so I would work like that. And I got to tour under band situations and be a writer in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I sort of left my own material to the wayside for quite a while, and then being surrounded by so many different ambitious and capable songwriters actively working on their craft after a point was really just something else. It made me want that for myself again.
Yeah. So when was that? That was probably around
2017-ish.
Okay.
That's when the Devil and Lilies broke up.
Okay. And that's when you started working on your EP that you put out in 2019.
I sat on it for a year. Like, I started gigging first under my name. I did a few of those 3-hour sets under my name. It took me a minute to figure out how to write songs again for myself. To figure out what that looked like, because I felt like I'd been writing for other people, or I felt like I'd just been focusing on guitar, and I hadn't focused on or developed whatever the hell I was supposed to be in front of a microphone.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing other stuff too. I have a background in improv comedy. I was taking classes at the Upright Citizens Brigade. You know, so I was kind of focusing on being a performer and being comfortable in typically uncomfortable situations and being the center of attention and sort of knowing how to drag things forward or where to stop on certain things. So a lot of that happened first.
I think to backtrack just a little bit, you know, you're saying that you like to perform on improv, and you're also just, you know, performing 14 shows a week and 3 hours a day. Did you ever, I mean, I'm sure there were many instances where you felt like, oh, I might not be able to make it through this performance, but then you did, and it felt like amazing after.
There have been times that have been really touch and go. There's only been one situation in which I have had to stop performing. In 2017, I was sort of at the height of what I'll jokingly call my percussion period. My dad had just died, and I had been sort of grieving by sweet-talking my way into my friends' bands as a conga player, which I am not qualified to be. It was a lot of drinking alcohol and just hitting things for catharsis.
Mm-hmm.
They were incredibly gracious by letting me do that. Yeah. Like, seriously gracious. I look back on that time, I'm like, at least that's how you were coping. Could have been a little bit worse. and my friends were very understanding, and it was a moment of endearment. And I was stepping off a stage. I was on stage with Liam Brown, and I stepped off wrong and like twisted my ankle.
Mm.
Now, normally something like that develops into a problem for me over the course of about 6 to 8 hours in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
Within an hour and a half to 2 hours tops. Because I did this before this set, it was problematic to the point where I think I started the second set, and they, I told my bandmate, like, yo, I did this might be a problem.
Were you standing or sitting while you were?
I was standing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And by the second set, I could no longer, I was beyond no longer stand comfortably. I was beyond toughing it out by the time I signaled my friend Christina over and said, I can't. I need to stop. And she and Johnny, with my arms over their shoulders, helped me off the stage.
Oh.
It was up there in terms of painful moments of my life.
Mm.
And that's not the end of the night either. Like, I went, instead of going home, my father had an apartment in a building with an elevator, and my medicine was in both places. We hadn't sold his place yet.
Mm.
So I went to his place because I didn't have to go up so many stairs.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie The Wolf of Wall Street?
No, I know of it, but I haven't seen it.
There's an elaborate scene in which Leonardo DiCaprio is on way too many Quaaludes and basically cannot stand of his own accord.
Yeah.
And he is helping himself with railings and climbing into his car and driving it. That's kind of what it felt like to have to medicate like that. I couldn't stand. So I did it kneeling. You medicate for this disorder typically intravenously.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing that with my arm on a chair cushion in sort of blinding pain that you're keeping down just long enough to do the thing that will scientifically heal you. And then you live with it for a while, and it's unbelievably uncomfortable.
I can't even imagine.
That is the one time that I've let this stop me. I've had a few shows, more than a few, where I was either in the middle of or in the process of healing from an elbow bleed, where my elbow could only perhaps extend this far. And so you learn a lot of bad habits to compensate for that. All of those are decisions I made, though, because by the time I had to make them, in most cases, it was clear that this wasn't getting better.
How, if at all, are you able to control in any way now if you wanted to perform? I know we haven't really been performing recently, but the last few times you performed, or if you ever get to perform again, how have you been able to, or be able to, like, not...
So,
yeah.
I get you. It's an interesting question for me because I, during COVID, managed to rehabilitate. I took the time to rehabilitate my arm.
Mm.
You know, the way it's being treated now, the hemophilia is better. The science has moved forward enough that certain drugs are performing better for my flavor of the disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that confidence, and the lack of work, I sought out physical therapy. Lucky me, I found a guy in my state who is also a hemophiliac who does physical therapy. Yeah, really. Talk about just dumb luck that there's a physical therapist with hemophilia.
I bet, like, they understand you way more.
Yeah. Yeah. It was... You get so cynical with a chronic disorder that it takes someone on the inside sometimes.
Mm.
You feel like, you see so many doctors that sometimes you know more about your disorder than the medical professional who spent all that money on a degree. So you get condescended to, and so you think nobody knows what you're going through. like that stereotypical goth cynicism, I guess. But that is to say, I rehabilitated my arm during COVID. I had the privilege and the opportunity through the Hemophilia Association of New Jersey to go see this guy.
Nice.
And I did like 7 months of PT with him. And so now I would hope that I would fare better during a show if I were to go back and do one of those. I would say this weird elbow thing that I have saw plenty of action when I was recording those basic tracks for the record I sent you.
Yeah, so you just recorded those in the past week, or this month recently?
Yeah, early February.
How long did you record for at those sessions and how much of the total was that?
We had 3 days. We had the basics for the record done in 2 days, and overdubs done by the 3rd day, and I was remarkably spry. Like, I was playing guitar, like, a lot of guitar, and I was playing it with the intention of every take to count. So I was feeling very good. And I told Mike, my doctor, as much.
Right.
Like, I'm like, yo, this is awesome right now. I feel better now than I did at like 20, 21, at 32. Like, it's ridiculous. This is stuff that I never thought I'd be able to do. And it kind of took a global pandemic taking all of my jobs away from me to appreciate that I could get help at this point.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I was just kind of putting project after project after myself, and it was getting unhealthy.
You finally took time to take care of yourself instead of just powering through.
Oh god, yeah. There was so much powering through.
So this new album is, I think you described it as like a reflection of all the effort that goes into living with a chronic condition and depression. I would love for you to talk about some of those songs, and like when were they written, and how did you decide to put them on this album?
So I tend to write music first. I like riffs. I like to come up with riffs and progressions that vibe with me, and I'll store them away. And so some of these ideas are pretty old. Some of them are around 2013, have their origins. Some of them are a little younger. The youngest I wrote in August, basically. It came up with the first iteration in August. The lyrics were all written this year with sort of minor things that I might have kept as layovers from the first inception of them. The structures of the songs all got written this year, basically. The topicality of them is something I'm still trying to study for the sake of continuing to be a songwriter. Because for a while, like I said, I was writing like as a portfolio person, so I wasn't writing super specifically about myself. I had to figure out how to write from a vulnerable place and how to craft it with what I felt was the appropriate kind of quality. That's been sort of the big lesson of this year, I think, this past year. Yeah. Is learning how to get in touch with myself and not feel like I'm doing it in a performative way, because otherwise, if it's performative, I can't do it. It's weird. I'm that person, apparently.
Well, not only have you got in touch with yourself with taking care of your physical health, and now you're getting in touch with yourself by writing more vulnerable songs. So it's in two different senses too.
Yeah. It could not be one without the other.
Yeah.
The effort went into when my wife and I started dating, when I got the diagnosis a decade ago, and more like with my bicep, I could close my arms around it. Like I've regrown muscle mass. I've had to sort of learn that effort from a very, very small level. So to put that together slowly and surely and to see that progress happen allowed me more like mental bandwidth to reflect, but also the perspective to kind of see my issues differently and to come to my own conclusions rather than feel as though I was being pushed towards the conclusions of other people. Each song on this record represents, I guess you could say, compartmentalization. I had that On This Day feature of Facebook?
Yeah.
Apparently, to the day, I asked the general world what if compartmentalizing was supposed to feel like something. So I guess it's a little poetic to say that I feel as though each of these songs categorizes a specific event of my life, or a cluster of events that equals a period, or a habit, or a theme, and figures out where it fits like a Tetris puzzle. So in knowing where it goes, I don't have to think about it anymore in the same ways that were perhaps very guilt-inducing or rage-inducing or anxiety-inducing. So each of these songs is ultimately supposed to be a form of resolution. Not all of it's classically resolved. Not all of it's classically uplifting. In fact, it was very important to me to combine my emotions in the most honest way I could, and the most straightforward way that I could, with the fewest promises I could make. Because I feel as though a lot of this stuff, in its effort to hit the broadest target possible, becomes too vague for some people to get meaning out of. Especially somebody who's a cynic like myself. You end up with a lot of uplifting material that feels unrelatable. Feels like it speaks over your head. Especially when you have a chronic illness, it feels like it's condescending as hell. So it was important for me to figure out, by those standards, what I was going to put out into the world, what I was going to do, not just because of what I thought would be better for other people, or what I thought other people would think of it, but that was the only way I could get it out. Those were like personal standards. And I feel they've made a more informed songwriter out of me.
Cool. Yeah, I will say I took a look at some of the lyrics too, and there's one that like I really liked that I think might sum up a lot of your experience. It was in your song Borderlines that will be on this next album. Shouting to the void, staring at the walls, petri dish in disarray. I really like that a lot. And I think it culminates like everything that you've been saying, kind of how you're trying to express like how all of this inside stuff has been making you feel to the world.
Exactly. And what was important to me about this is that while like I have that hemophilia lens, that I wasn't going to be niche about it. In my case, when you are living with a chronic disorder, there is a mental health aspect to it. And when you have nothing else wrong with you and are simply clinically depressed, we all arrive at the same well to drink, essentially. What gets us there is unique. But the condition of depression is universal. Mine just happens to be related to my blood not getting its shit together sometimes. But there are a million ways to get depressed. So the song Borderline specifically deals with finding the individual in the malaise of depression. Petri dish in disarray essentially refers to the neglect that your living space takes on when you're in the middle of a depressive spell. I keep coming back to dishes in the sink for something like that, or laundry piling up and coming out of it. Like, oh God, let's get to work on these dishes. What did I do? It is the sum of that effort. The effort is, and I'm no longer depressed. The sum is, oh God, I got to do those dishes. You see what I mean in terms of like the small victories, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, the small victories are also great victories.
that you need those. You need the small I need them anyway. I need the small victories. I need them in order to feel. I feel like the small victories happen so that the big victories can happen.
Mm-hmm.
For me, anyway.
So when do you think you'll be putting this new album out for everybody to hear?
I don't know. I'm hoping late this year.
Yeah.
I have a timeline in mind of completing the vocals in March, ideally.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have something to show by like June or July before the single.
Yeah.
But I definitely will feel better about that timeline as tracking is completed.
I think like one of the last questions for you is, you mentioned that you're working on or starting a crowdfunding campaign.
The crowdfunding campaign is to promote this record and to generate hemophilia publicity, which is essentially, I remember in one of the interviews I was watching with, I believe it was Miss Lee or Mrs. Lee, I don't know enough about her personal life, but she said something about her brand, and you ask any artist about their brand, some people are probably super dialed in, but for me it was a horrifying experience to consider brand, and I think it was because likely I was in denial or I hadn't created enough of a quality product to represent this sort of blend of music and hemophilia for a while, because I was such a sideman and because I was very proud. I didn't address hemophilia in my work or in relationship to my work, so it was not relevant to interviews until I needed a hook to promote the Betamax EP. And I spoke to Jim Testa of the Jersey Journal, and he said, "Do you have a hook?" And I said, "All right. I was basically diagnosed with arthritis 10 years ago because my blood doesn't work. How's that?" It was sufficient enough of a hook for me to open that sort of catalyst and put me back into the bleeding disorder community and make me feel as though I had perhaps a value to contribute to the community through getting attention for my work, because I'm a scruffy white dude with tattoos who writes songs. There are so many of those. Novelty is not a thing that by itself has.
Yeah.
So I realized that leaving the community and getting out of it meant I knew how to talk to people outside the community, which may not be a thing that a lot of people in our community are able to do. There's like 25,000 of us, 35,000 of us in America.
Yeah.
Like 500,000 of us worldwide. So there's not exactly enough of us so that when we meet a whole bunch of us, we're kind of bonded by blood to what is that, an Exodus record or something? So the fact that I could come back to the community like, hey, I play guitar and I've been touring the country and I'm going to figure out how to make all this work and try and become like the Bruce Springsteen of hemophilia or something. It's a niche. It's a niche, and I ran away from it forever. And there's a song on the record called Dear Anxious that specifically deals with that. It's the youngest song on the record. And it is perhaps because I was still finding my voice, and this song sort of compartmentalized me working on finding the courage to do the thing that was, fucking obvious. So to be able to use that and to have it be this Mobius strip that I referred to earlier on in a different context as a way to generate publicity toward my work, to have the work authentically reflect the situation I'm driving attention towards, and to be able to use it to create a dialogue and promote awareness for a disorder. So I was hoping that this could be an alternative avenue through which I could bring awareness to myself, because this is inherently selfish. The music that I feel has to meet a standard to match the occasion that is larger than myself, which is the condition. The sort of macrocosm of chronic conditions on the whole, there's a grand community of them now. There likely always has been, but with the advent of social media, you see all sorts of disability advocacy happening. So to be a part of that conversation and transcend my specific niche, and then to find a way to take all of that off the table and find ways to relate beyond that specific tree line with the wells in our mind that we all arrive at, albeit different routes. We all get there through the circumstances of life, and at the end of the day, it was really important to write to that level of relatability while still staying in touch with the actual personality, I suppose, of myself and the circumstances that led me there. Because otherwise, it would have just been performative. It wouldn't have been the cathartic exercise that playing music is.
Yeah. I've heard of hemophilia before, and I think I just thought of it as like people get bruises. So it's nice to like talk to you about your experiences, and that it's a little more than that, and probably different for many people and how it presents itself for sure.
That's one of those things where there are also people with this disorder who have it worse than I do. So it's been and then at the end of the day, it's all you know. It's as the phrase that keeps coming back to me is it's as ordinary as fingernails. Like you're not necessarily aware you have them unless one of them hurts. So the record is called Redefine.
Okay.
The last song on the record is the title track. And the campaign is called Redefine Hemophilia. Because that sounds way better than Hemophilia for Everyone! Which was my other working title. Because I thought, what if I was a supervillain and made a gigantic ray that gave everybody blood problems like mine? Because you can't, how they say turn disabilities into superpowers. Like, this one only makes you a villain, I promise. But the idea is that I'm redefining my relationship with the disorder through what I've been able to do with my physiology and what I've been able to do for my mental health. And I want to inform others in my community that this is something I've done, and perhaps they can find their meaning within it, instead of looking at other people only presenting this sort of visage of exceptionalism. I want to present the millimeters and the little reasonable things and the little mantras that actually work for me, because I had to write my own and I couldn't just Google mantra and pull them off Pinterest. And I'm hoping that others can find their meaning, sort of redefine as I did my own sort of relationship with my mental health. But also, as you've given me the privilege of doing tonight, I'm redefining the perspective in which those who have no relationship to the disorder might have. I'm redefining the public conception. That is the effort that I'm going for. And that should be the premise for the rest of my career if I do this correctly.
I appreciate you telling your story today. I have very much enjoyed learning about it and hearing from you, and I cannot wait until you put out the whole album and everyone can listen and get even better understanding of everything.
I can't wait either. It's a thrill to have found what feels like a good delivery system for something that could come across really preachy in one flavor, something that could come across really cheesy or hackneyed or disingenuous in another. My soul feels at rest with this work, and that's sort of the first time I can say that, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate chatting with you, and to everybody else, goodbye, and until next time.
Thanks, guys.